People of Reddit, what is your downright scariest real-life story? Serious? I used to sleepwalk when I was a child. We lived in a rough neighborhood, Decatur, Georgia, and I would wake up outside in the middle of the night, not knowing how I got there, and would have to walk home and walk into the darkened doorway I had left wide open for whoever might be lurking around. However, the time that scared me the most was when I was about 9 years old. I woke up and found myself with the bedroom curtains drawn back and staring out the window. As I came awake, I noticed a very large and completely hairless man, no hair, eyebrows etc., staring at me and slowly inching closer to the window and closer to my face. He was looking bewildered, like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. At that moment, I realized what was going on and I started screaming uncontrollably, frozen in place and peeing down my leg. The man freaked out and screamed, did a tumbling move, and then ran off in a weird zigzag like he was trying to dodge bullets. My mom woke up and thought I probably had a nightmare. The next morning we found a screwdriver on the front porch and damage to the door jamb and door handle. I still just about pee my pants when I tell that story, but now it is usually from laughing. I will never forget the look on his face when I started coming to life and screaming, or his high-pitched scream, or his duck and roll and dodging and bobbing all the way down the street. I was home alone when I was 11. I had just fallen asleep and someone tried to break in the front door. I called 911 and hid in the pantry in the bottom shelf. They came to the door next to the pantry and tried to break into that door too. The police got there and one of them picked me up and held me until my mom got there. I wouldn't let go and he made sure I felt safe. I'm 27 and haven't stayed home alone much since. The day I signed a lease for my first apartment, I got a dog so I wouldn't be alone. It's pretty traumatizing when you're that young. Was with a guy for a couple of years when I realized that he'd taken up smoking meth as a hobby after work. We had numerous problems already, and I had 3 small kids, so I finally kicked him out. A few days later, maybe a week, he makes a fake Facebook page and sends me a friend request. The only posts on the page were talking about killing me and my children, his suicide, and how he planned to do it that day. The most recent post was accompanied by a selfie of him in my backyard, a recent selfie, so he had been there. I was on my way home with the kids late in the evening when I got the request. I had stopped by my parents' home the day before and gotten my dad's 9mm handgun, because he was sending messages through mutual friends about burning my house down. I called the police as soon as I got home, and they didn't seem to think it was a big deal and didn't have an officer available to come check my house before we walked into it. I live in the middle of the woods and we have a rinky-dink police force. Anyway, I made the kids stay in the car. I gave my oldest instructions on what to do if anything happened, and I had to sweep my own home, in the dark, with a 9mm in case he was in there waiting for me and my children. And it was terrifying. I had to check my entire house every time we came home for a while, and I was always worried that I'd eventually find him in there. Police were called numerous times, and I was eventually granted a restraining order a couple weeks later, when the death threats continued. He died about a year ago, and all I felt was relief. Hearing a weird groan while hanging out with friends in a sketchy part of Phoenix. We could hear someone groaning and occasionally saying help in a soft and tired voice. We go towards the voice, and find a guy laying on the ground in a blood-covered shirt, one hand holding up a knife in his gut. His eyes were weirdly focused on us, but was whimpering and writhing. He kept saying, "Help me, oh God, I'm going to die. Please, help me." We said we would call an ambulance, and he really didn't like that idea. "No. Don't call 911, just help me. I'm going to die." We called anyway. He stood up in his blood-covered shirt, knife in hand, said fuck, and ran away. Years ago, in one of my first jobs, a colleague told me a story. The night before, she had gone out for some drinks, and on the way home, she had got off the bus and was walking down her road to her house. A taxi pulled up alongside her and the driver told her to get in the car. She obviously said no. He then said to her, "Call whoever you want whilst you're in the car, but please just get in and I'll explain." So she got in. Turns out, walking towards her was a topless guy with no shoes on and a machete in his hand. Cab driver had already called the police, but then saw my colleague so had stopped to look after her. Edit, for clarity, the cabbie was a black cab driver and was completely honest and trustworthy. When I first learned that some of the nicest people out there can be dealing with some terrible demons. When I was younger, about around 2nd or 3rd grade, I had a math tutor at the time. She was my mom's friend from AA, didn't really understand it at the time. She was a really nice lady, and the reason I'm so good with math even till this day. One of the days she was supposed to come over, my mother couldn't get a hold of her, so my mom got concerned and we took a ride over to check on her to see if she was okay. When we got to her place, we found her so drunk, laying on the floor and couldn't even stand. My mom had to call an ambulance. Later that day my mom had to explain to me what happened and that she had passed away. Taught me that day no matter how good things look on the outside for some people, the demons on the inside could just be moments away from taking them. So, in my city there's a canal. There are several bridges crossing it, one being a smaller openable metal bridge for bikes and pedestrians. It's like a skeleton of iron bars with a wooden path in the middle. That said, there are lots of large gaps in it. When I was young, don't remember exact age, but under 10, I was biking with my parents and siblings along the canal and was about to cross that bridge. Me and my brother went first, a little too close to each other, resulting in us colliding and falling to the side on our bikes. My brother fell on the path, but I was too close to the edge and went out through one of those gaps. The bridge itself was just like a meter over the water, and this was just in the edge of it, but I just remember losing control over myself, splashing into the cold dark water fighting for dear life. I was a kid. Couldn't swim. Somehow I was able to grab one of the metal bars slightly, at which I held onto. Panic. That's the only way to describe my feeling. All this happened in a couple seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Suddenly I heard a splash and felt my dad beside me in the water lifting me up. And that was it. Was so embarrassed, haven't to this day, I'm 19 now, told more than a handful of people about it. Went to therapy with my first husband. He went on and on about how I was a bad wife. When it was my turn I just said I would like him to stop hitting me or dragging me across the floor. He wasn't happy. The therapist asked me to attend the next session alone. Husband wanted to know what I told the therapist. I can't even remember what I said. When we got home, he took my keys, pager, glasses and tried to lock me in the bedroom. He also had the landline cut off. It took 2 tries, but I finally escaped with what I could fit in my car. This was 20 plus years ago. I still have nightmares. He constantly told me if I left him he would kill me. So 1 a.m. glad I got out. I was 14 when we started dating. He was in his mid-20s and a friend of my dad's. When I was 17 my mom's husband had this mental breakdown and plotted or attempted to kill her. I was recovering from knee surgery at the time, but still ran from my room to see what was going on. My baby brother, who was 4 at the time, was in the room when he was choking and stomping on her, and I had took him out the room and told my other siblings to leave the house and get someone to call the cops. I had to tackle him to get him off her, and had pinned him up against the washer and dryer and yelled at her to leave. I had tried to lock him in their room to leave the house and look for my siblings, and he just pushed me and went into the kitchen to grab a knife. He was trying to hurt himself because in the small time frame I had called the cops. While on the phone he looked me in the eaves and started to cut himself and then locked himself in the bathroom since he figured he would be arrested if he was gone. What scared me the most was how calm he was when he said, "She's cheating on me, so if I can't have her no one else will," as I was screaming at him. I have no idea how I had got him off her because he was 6 feet 3 inches and 300 somethings IBS. I'm 21 now and to this day I get jumpy around knives and panic when I don't hear from my mom after she leaves the house. One was rushing to a lab class, had books in one hand, lunch in the other and attempted to walk downstairs into the lab. Except the steps were old cement steps with metal lips. And the tip of my foot caught the lip. I went head first, never touched anything the entire way down until I landed on my neck against the wall at the bottom of the stairs. I felt my entire weight load into my neck and every single vertebrate popped. I knew I was dead. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Everyone rushed out of the lab to see what happened. Apparently it was loud. I was 300 pounds at the time. And then all got the sudden the breath rushed back into my lungs and I could breathe. And move. I got up. It felt miraculous. Ended up with occasional severe back pain that eventually went away after 18 months or so. My best friend growing up had an aunt that was the sweetest woman. Like your stereotypical, actually devout, Christian that just wanted to be nice to everyone and do nice things for people, volunteered to help the homeless when she wasn't working in the office at her church. Every weekend she would give me and my friend $5 each to pick up cigarette butts on the block, and then she'd also feed us and give us candy. Just one of the best people you could know, and genuinely so. She started dating a man from her church that was attracted to how beautiful she was on the inside, as she was on the outside. After a few months in, he decided that her showing kindness towards other people, especially men, was a sign that she was cheating on him. The same kindness she'd always shown everybody, and the reason he claimed to have fallen for her in the first place. So how does this obviously reasonable man react? He waited outside of her house for her to get home from work one day, forced her to the ground and then cut her heart out of her chest in front of her townhouse in the middle of the afternoon. He sat with the body holding her heart, while he waited for the police to show up. Said she deserved to have her heart broken exactly as she broke his. That story and the trial that followed were in the news for a while. He ended up getting something like 60 years in prison, and he was already fairly old at the time, so effectively a life sentence. When I was 11 or 12, one of my classmates moved out of the area, but he invited some of us to visit him for his birthday later that year. He had made a new friend at his new school and invited him to the get-together as well. We were exploring around his house and my friend and his new friend said we should go check out the rope swing in the woods nearby. We hiked back on this little trail and found this rope swing, which was just a long rope with a piece of wood tied to the end. It looked like if you used it you would swing out pretty far over this steep wooded hillside. They asked who wanted to try it, and normally I would take risks and do things like that, but it just seemed dangerous to me and I said I might go, but I wouldn't be the first. My friend's new friend said he would go on the rope swing. Still, to this day, I don't know if they were familiar with using it in the past or not, or if he was trying to be cool and impress us. He swung way out, and at the apex of his swing one hand slipped off the wood handle and then the other. For a split second I thought, oh cool, there's a safe place to land, and he meant to do it. There was no safe landing. He made impact on a felled tree, and then pitched forward and slid several feet on some rocks. He was dead instantly. Of course, we did not know he was dead right away. We had to make our way down there to try to help him. His lips were already blue when we got there. I had salmonella as a kid. I spent a week at home with the flu before finally going to the doctor. I spent a week at my local hospital, having all kinds of different medications pumped into me. Then it was a week at the children's hospital, where they wanted to make sure my insides hadn't turned to goo. Fever of 104.0 F, hallucinating crickets in the walls. Another week at home with god-awful stomach cramps, as my gut tried to get used to solid foods again. Fun times. A few years later, my family moved to Ottawa, so we went for a walk around the Parliament buildings for some sightseeing. My family was a little ahead of me when someone grabbed me from behind and dragged me back, away from my family. I was calling for my mom, terrified, as a group of Asian tourists dragged me into the middle of them so that I could be part of their group photo. They released me afterwards. My mother jokes about how she turned around and see all these people wrapped around me taking pictures. How they just wanted photos with a little blonde Canadian, and that I could be in someone's brochures. I'm a bit late to the party, but here it goes. Warning, dead bodies and thalassophobia. I was part of the volunteer search and rescue unit, as a rescue diver. My job involved looking for missing persons in the sea or river. My first recovery was my scariest one. If you don't know what happens to human bodies after prolonged marine exposure, trust me, don't look it up. In this case, the 30-ish-year-old woman has been missing for 3 days. At this point, we were just looking for evidence she might have been in a cove underwater cave system. mostly looking for personal items. My diving buddy and I were looking at a rock formation when we found a watch. We sent a mark afloat. I was busy writing down the location and time while my buddy bagged the watch when I felt something brush my shoulder. I turned around to see a white cut and partially eaten and decomposed hand touch my shoulder. I quickly recoiled and watched in horror was the body bobbed in and out of a dark crevice under a rock formation. I'm not gonna go into details as to how she looked like to spare you. Turns out she decided to end her life. She was a suspected sex trafficking victim and had slit her wrists before jumping in the sea. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one.